Apollousa, Bow of the Goddess, is really good. This card buffs everything. It's incredibly generic, and with that in mind, I feel it's important to highlight just how incredible of a boss monster this card is. Regardless of it being good, however, is it worth its $73 price point? Well, in this video, whether we aim at what the card does, including it having potentially more than 4 negates, its applications, how it will impact the metagame, or finding out if it's worth it or not, today let's find out if Apollousa, Bow of the Goddess, is worth it. If you guys want any of the cards mentioned in this video, just like Apollousa, make sure to go down into the description and check out my TCG player affiliate link. It supports me immensely, and if you guys want to support me, this is an incredible way of doing so. The link is in the description. With that, guys, let's find out if Apollousa, Bow of the Goddess, is worth it. So to start, what does Apollousa do? Well, Apollousa is a Link 4 Wind Fairy Link effect monster with a mystery amount of attack and requires 2+ monsters with different names except tokens. And it has the following effect. This card's original attack becomes the number of materials used for its Link summon times 800. Once per chain, when your opponent activates a monster effect, quick effect, you can make this card lose exactly 800 attack, and if you do, negate the activation. You can only control one Apollousa, Bow of the Goddess. So let's start here. Its max attack is 3200 attack and its minimum attack is 1600. It can negate up to 4 monster effects in general. When we're talking about guard dragons comparatively, the guard dragons obviously get you Hot Red, the Horatic Link, and any main deck dragon monsters like Brotar searching a Levianeer and ripping a card out of hand, or Destrudo, something like that. So you could say the guard dragon combo results in, let's say, around 3 to 4 disruptions, which obviously is really good, but that's only for decks that can use guard dragons. Both are powerful, but as I've already stated, the guard dragon combo can only use guard dragons and dragons, but Apollousa can be used in literally any deck. Apollousa is more generic and easier to summon, meaning we'll see this more widely used. Another comparison is the recently banned Bard, which only provides 2 Fog Blades in comparison to the 4 negates you can potentially have with Apollousa. Now, to be fair, there are some differences. With Bard, you would usually use it in an Orcust combo, which means you have 4 disruptions at max because you're going to summon back the Dingirsu, and then use Bard and Dingirsu send and pop effect, meaning that's 4 disruption right there with the 2 Fog Blades. But my point here is Apollousa is so much more generic than something like the Guard Dragons or something like Bard. Bard is pretty generic, I'm not gonna lie, but my point here is Apollousa is also really generic, even more generic. One thing I want to mention real quick, it can negate more than 4 cards. If it has at least 800 attack, it can negate something. So what does this mean? In any deck where you can buff a monster by 800 attack at the very minimum, the Apollousa that would be able to negate 4 times or 3 times would instead be able to negate 1 more time. A perfect example of this is Vision Hero Multiply Guy. So a new card that can buff Apollousa by exactly 800 is Vision Hero Multiply Guy, coming out of Battles of Legend Heroes Revenge. This card is used in hero decks primarily, but this is an interesting interaction because Multiply Guy will give your monster 800 more attack, giving it another negate. Another thing to note is that it doesn't actually destroy the card, and it's only once per chain. So this means you can't negate 2 cards in the same chain, and you also don't actually remove whatever you're negating from the field. And it only being once per chain can be relevant too. Let's say your opponent activates a monster effect and you chain Apollousa, and then your opponent chains another monster effect. Well, Apollousa can't negate that. Apollousa enables your plays to resolve through hand traps. So one really important thing this card does is resolve your monster effects through hand traps. One very practical scenario where this is going to come up is the Orcust combo. Apollousa does the entire Orcust combo without worrying about any hand trap other than Impermanence. While Impermanence can negate the Orcust combo still, the fact that every other hand trap becomes irrelevant when opposing this card is really good for combo decks. And even if your opponent doesn't use a hand trap, that still means they have to play played through 3 monster negates on Apollousa. The last thing I'll note about Apollousa before we jump into the applications is that it's easier to destroy as it negates more things because its attack reduces. So if Apollousa has 3 negates and has 2400 attack and uses one of the negates, it becomes 1600. If it uses another negate, it becomes 800. And by the point it becomes 800, it's very easy to destroy Apollousa. And especially because Apollousa doesn't actually clear the field, if your opponent just special summons Crusadia Reclusia and uses the effect targeting itself and Apollousa, Apollousa is forced to negate it, and then you can just go for Magius, and then eventually you just attack over the Apollousa, making Apollousa a lot worse. It's still good to have 3 negates, don't get me wrong, but if it dies like that, then it's just not nearly as good. So what are some of the applications for this card? Well, let's start with Orcust. Orcust can use any 2 monsters to combo, so you can summon this and then link for Mermaid. It basically enables your mermaid to always resolve. A perfect example of an enabler for this combo are the Goki and Warrior monsters. The reason why Goki is such a good way to enable this combo is because of a card like Goki Rematch and Isolde. Isolde will special an Octo Stretch, then you special summon Headbat from your hand, link for the Cerberus or Phoenix, then you use Rematch, summon back 2 more Gokis, summon Apollousa. It will have 3 negates at this point. You link the Cerberus into a mermaid, and then you're in a really good position from there because their hand traps are basically rendered useless, or you just have 3 negates. So this is a perfect example of how Gokis are an easy enabler for this combo. Salamangreat, Almirage, and Ip also works with this combo, but the issue is Ip is also a way of getting access to the Guard Dragons, so you might as well just summon the Guard Dragons because right now the Guard Dragons are just inherently more powerful than Apollousa and the Orcust combo. Ip is an incredible card, but I wouldn't personally recommend trying to turbo this out to Orcust combo now that Bard is banned. If Bard was still in the game, then things would be different, but with Bard banned, it becomes a whole different story for Ip. It gives you more disruption in the Orcust combo, which is really important because right now Orcust aren't ending on that great of boards, so having another good amount of disruptions in the form of Apollousa is really important. The last thing I'll say about the Orcust application is that Dingirsu protects Apollousa when at lower attack. So when Apollousa is at 800 attack, for example, and it's super easy to be destroyed by battle, Dingirsu will actually make sure your Apollousa stays on the field, which is important because then you can use the last negate on Apollousa. Next, let's talk about Salamangreat. If this deck is not dead, even though Salamangreat was still hit on the ban list, if it is still relevant, because there is a chance it can be, they will be playing Apollousa, and the reason why? Well, it's ridiculous in Salamangreat. Its effect isn't activated, which means you can actually summon Apollousa while under Mirage Stalios condition. This is huge because Salamangreat can summon Link 4s with 3 materials so easily. The reason why it's so good in Salamangreat is because of the Spinny Gazelle combo. While this is more inconsistent now, if your Gazelle gets hand trapped in this combo, you end on no disruption with the Spinny and Gazelle, because you need Gazelle to send either a Falco or a trap in order to get you access to some form of disruption. But if your Gazelle gets hand trapped, you are recycling resources, but those resources don't actually do anything. So now with Apollousa, those resources do something. If you go Spinny Gazelle combo and you end on Mirage Stallion, Jack Jaguar, and Sunlight Wolf with the Gazelle in hand, you can link those 3 monsters into Apollousa, giving you a form of disruption on your opponent's turn. This is huge for the deck because inherently Salamangreat have a higher ceiling than a deck like Sky Striker, but at the same time they don't have as good of board presence. So now that Apollousa is out, even through a hand trap, their board presence becomes a lot more impactful. Next, let's talk about Pendulum. Pendulum, depending on the route Pendulum goes, will most likely be playing Apollousa. Pairing Apollousa with Vortex and other negates is super strong. It may not be used as much now because of the Hieratic Seal and Guard Dragons in the game, but regardless, this is something you want to own as a Pendulum player because at some point, Pendulum will be turboing out Apollousa. They'll be going Absolute again, turboing that Absolute into an Apollousa, and then using Absolute to summon Vortex. So this is going to be a huge deal in Pendulum. So definitely, if you plan on playing Pendulum for the foreseeable future, make sure you own Apollousa. There are other decks too, but really any deck can abuse this card if they can make it. The hand trap protection makes this card viable in almost any combo deck that can make use of it to enable your plays to resolve, or it can be used as a board ender, as a way of putting more disruption on the field. Very similar to Bard, and also making your boards a lot stronger than they would have been without it. So in the end, is Apollousa, Bow of the Goddess, worth it? This card will 100% see play in the future and is a staple, and because of these conditions, how widely it will be played, regardless of the $73 price point as of right now, it is 100% worth it. It may go down soon considering we're still waiting a few days for Rising Rampage to be released, but regardless, it's a very powerful card that will find its way into multiple extra decks. And so regardless of the price, if you're playing a more combo-based deck like Pendulum, Orcust, or Salamangreat, you will definitely want to own this card, and considering a deck like Pendulum, just as an example, will most likely be relevant next format, that's why Apollousa, Bow of the Goddess is worth it. Thanks for watching.